Sophia had been in a great mood since morning. It was not surprising at all, considering that today was the girl's 21st birthday, which meant that today her father would finally give her the promised gift, a new sports car of the latest model. And of course, her friends would not leave her without expensive gifts too. But actually, she had a holiday almost every day. Her whole life seemed like a celebration. The girl had no mother since childhood, so her loving father never denied her anything. Sophia's whole life consisted of hanging out in bars and clubs, shopping with her friends, and having fun. Of course, previously she had to go to school, at least sometimes, but her school life was already over. Sophia didn't want to go to university. She managed to persuade her father to give her a year off, and she planned to have as much fun as possible. Of course, the new car would help her a lot in that. The girl waited impatiently for breakfast, knowing that right before breakfast, her father would give her a birthday present. When the girl saw her father, she hugged him with squeals. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." Jack hugged his daughter with a soft smile. "Here's your present." Just as promised, he handed the girl the keys, and a car horn honked cheerfully somewhere outside the window. "Well, thank you." The girl instantly escaped from her father's embrace and rushed to look out the window. Her dream was already standing in the yard, tied with a big red bow. "Enjoy." And one more thing, the girl turned around to see the driver's license in her father's hands. "Oh my goodness, that's awesome. Daddy, you're the best." "Yeah, I'm glad you like it. But you remember what you promised me, right?" he added with seriousness in his voice. "I made you a driver's license, but you have to drive as carefully as possible, as the instructor taught you. Understand?" "Yes, of course." Sophia's eyes glistened when she saw the driver's license and the car. Her father immediately realized that she had forgotten all her promises and her lessons with the instructor. "Sophia, this is no joke." Jack tried to draw attention to his words. Once again, driving a car can be very dangerous, especially on loaded highways. Be very careful. Do you understand me? Just one mistake, and I'll take the car away from you, even though it's a gift. "I understand, Daddy." Sophia finally looked at her father. "I will be very careful. I promise. Everything will be okay." She kissed her father on the cheek and immediately rushed to the car. Jack thoughtfully sat down at the table, which had already been set for his standard breakfast. He was already regretting that he had agreed to give his daughter such a dangerous gift. But how could he refuse her? She'd been begging him for a car for a long time. As usual, he tried to call her several times during the day. Usually, the girl could ignore 1 or 2 calls, but then she would call back. But today she ignored all 10 calls. By the night, the situation was getting worse. Sophia persistently didn't answer his calls and even dropped one on purpose. But at least it was clear where she was. Jack got a text message on his phone that Sophia had paid for the rental of the VIP room in one of the most expensive restaurants. Jack was sitting in his favorite armchair in the living room, spending the hours before bed alone. As usual, it was past midnight, but his daughter was still not home. The man was falling into the most dangerous mortal sin of all: despondency. In fact, for Jack, every Sophia's birthday was filled with pain. 21 years ago, his beloved wife died in childbirth, leaving him with a daughter. At that time, he was in total despair. The man tried to fully immerse himself in work, thinking that this would be the right thing to do. He loved his daughter very much and tried not to deny her anything. The girl grew up without a mother, and Jack could not replace her, so he pampered his little girl Joy and forgave her all the mischief. Now, 21 years later, Jack realized he shouldn't have done that. The nursery, filled with expensive dolls, gradually turned into a teenager's room, and Jack had to add a work-in closet to it because Sophia was buying more and more clothes. Lately, the girl had been spending more and more money on herself and her friends, having fun to the fullest. "Miriam, I feel so guilty," the man muttered quietly, not noticing the tears welling up in his eyes. I'm sure you're looking down at us from heaven and realizing that I didn't raise our daughter the way you wished." When the silence outside the room was broken by the phone ringing, he flinched in surprise and instantly reached for the phone, hoping it was his wayward daughter calling. But he was surprised to see his friend's name on the screen. "Hello, Derek." "Hello, Jack," a male voice sounded. "I'd apologize for calling so late, but I don't think you are going to go to bed." "Get to the point." "Actually, there's a slight problem," Derek sighed. "I didn't want to bother you, especially on a day like this, but your daughter is at the police station right now." The girl crashed her car into the window of an expensive fashion store. "I'm trying to keep this case quiet. You should come here. Pick her up from the police." "I got it," the man replied gruffly after a few seconds of silence. "Thanks for the call, Derek. I'm very grateful to you." Jack changed his clothes quickly, and a few minutes later he was on his way to the police station. He'd been here sometimes for work, or just to visit his friend, but he'd never been there for such unpleasant purpose. It took more than an hour to sort things out. First, the man had to talk to the store owner, then to the police. The window was smashed to pieces. The car needed the hood and the entire left fender replaced. And it's a miracle that none of the passengers were injured. Jack owned a successful business and lived a wealthy life, but that kind of expense was significant even for him. When the policeman brought Sophia to him, she was already completely sober and very angry. "Daddy." Finally, she exhaled grumpily. "You're not going to believe this, but they've been forcibly keeping me here. Like they don't know who I am." Jack's facial expression changed. "Get in the car, now," he commanded coldly. The girl fell silent, realizing she had done something wrong, and obediently headed for the exit. She got into her father's car quietly, trying not to draw attention to herself. Only a few minutes later, when they had driven far enough away from the police station, she decided to start repenting. The day started off so well. I spent almost 5 hours at the beauty salon and got my nails and my hair done. Then the girls and I went shopping, just for an hour. Then we went to a cafe while we waited for the others. Maria and Kate were late, and Samantha said she couldn't come at all. Can you believe that? It was my birthday party. Anyway, we decided not to wait for her and went to the restaurant. Later, Monica, Alice, and Natalie joined us. I didn't plan on inviting them, but they came and even brought me presents. Can you believe it? Then we spent the whole evening in that restaurant, and later we went to a bar. After all, I turned 21. I can go to the bar. Did I already tell you about the presents I got? Sophia swallowed the lump in her throat as her father remained silent, looking glumly at the road. He'd never been so angry before. He wasn't even talking to her now. "Dad, nothing terrible happened," the girl continued in a slightly offended manner. "When Lily and Christina were going home, I decided to give them a ride. I remembered your instructions and was going to be as careful as possible. But the instructor didn't prepare me for a situation like this. This situation is his fault. You should have fired him. But it's actually your fault, too. If you'd bought me a more expensive car, this wouldn't have happened." The girl was already shouting, but her father continued to watch the road in silence. Sophia also fell silent for a while, not wanting to share anything since her father was not interested. But soon, she shouted nervously, "Dad, say something." The frustrated girl couldn't stand it. "I actually spent an hour at the police station. Don't you feel sorry for me at all? By the way, where are we going?" Only now Sophia looked out the window. They should have already arrived at the street with many beautiful mansions where she and her father lived. But for some reason, they were driving outside the city. "Dad," the girl whispered quietly in a different voice, "where are you driving me to? Did I make you so angry that you decided to get rid of me and take me to the woods so the wolves could eat me?" "Shut up," Dad replied glumly. This time the girl didn't dare to answer anything and remained silent. Previously, whenever Sophia did something wrong, her father had lectured her for hours and even blocked her bank card a couple of times. But this was the first time he'd looked like this. Sophia could only look in horror at the approaching village. It was dark in the village. There was only one street lamp on each street, so the scene looked like a nightmare. When her father stopped the car in front of an old one-story house with a shabby fence, the girl panicked. "Daddy," she cried out in fright, "why did you bring me here? There's obviously no one living here." "What do you mean, no one?" The father worked around the car and opened the door for his daughter. "This is your late grandmother's house, and from now on, you live here." "What? Are you unhappy about something?" Dad raised his eyebrow calmly. "You don't want to study, you don't want to work, and you don't appreciate what you already have. Therefore, this is where you live now. Here, I packed some of your clothes. I'm sorry, I couldn't pack everything. It's hard to put your entire closet in one suitcase, but this should be enough for 3 months. There's also some money, but I don't recommend spending it all at once. Because this amount should be enough for 3 months, I'm not going to give you any more money. If you spend it sooner, that's your problem. And I'm taking your phone away. Your bank account is already blocked. In 3 months, in early September, I'll come and pick you up. But until then, do what you want." Sophia was so confused that she didn't even realize what was going on. There was a suitcase standing next to her, a very small one. "Dad, you're kidding, right?" The girl looked up at him with hope in her eyes. "I promise I'll never, ever get into this kind of trouble with a car again. I won't even beg for another car. And I'll behave properly for the rest of the year. Just take me away from here, please." But the man got into the car, closed the door, and started to drive away. Sophia tried to pull the handle on the passenger door, but it was already locked from the inside. Without turning around, her father mercilessly drove away. "You can't leave me here." The girl squealed in panic, trying to chase the departing car. "You can't do this. You can't." But her father really drove away. The noise of the car engine was getting quieter, and soon it vanished, and the girl was left alone, in the middle of the dark street. Sophia could not move, just stood looking at the road, trying to comfort herself, thinking that it was just a way of punishment. And now her father would come back, say that he was joking, but that he would forgive her. However, Daddy didn't come back. Sophia couldn't believe that her dad could kick her out of the house on her birthday. What a nice gift. "Thank you, Daddy." A dog barking was heard somewhere very close by, and Sophia fearfully walked closer to the house. She had to do something. She couldn't stay outside. She would freeze, but she was afraid to go inside. What if there were homeless people living there? Besides, the house had been empty for many years. Was it even possible to live there? There could be anything inside. There could be a lock on the door. Or if there is no lock, she would be left unprotected overnight. Sophia didn't even know which option was worse. Suddenly, the dog barked again, but this time, the barking was very close, and the girl shuddered and rushed to the door. If anything happened, her death would be her father's fault. The door was locked, but looking around, the girl found the key above the door jamb. Everything inside was dark and gloomy, and so the girl tried to step carefully on the floor, moving her feet squeamishly. It was scary to enter every room, so she quickly worked to the farthest one. It turned out to be the bedroom. Sophia heard some rustling behind her. She got scared and immediately ran inside the bedroom, closed the door, and blocked the doorknob with the back of the chair. Her eyes had already gotten used to the darkness, so it was easy to see that the room had 2 windows covered with thick curtains, a bed, and a small closet. Sophia had no choice, so she hurriedly took off her shoes, pulled off her fancy dress, and climbed under the heavy blanket. At first, it was very cold and uncomfortable, but then she warmed up and relaxed. It seemed to the girl that she would not fall asleep from the shock she had experienced. Adrenaline was pounding in her temples. Tears of resentment were still in her eyes, and Sophia felt so sorry for herself. But as soon as she warmed up, she fell asleep. In the morning, the girl opened her eyes and was amazed that the room looked quite cozy. It hadn't been renovated in about 20 years, but the furniture and wallpaper were in good condition. There was no dust, and the room smelled more or less normal. The windows were new. Sophia dared to leave the room. Her suitcase had been left outside, and now she needed some clothes, so she had to go out into the yard. She brought the suitcase into the house and immediately opened it. She wondered what clothes her father had chosen for Sophia's new life. But her father didn't really think much about her outfits in a hurry. He simply put the most basic items in her suitcase. A couple of shirts, 3 t-shirts, a pair of jeans, sweatpants, shorts, and sneakers. Also a hygiene kit, a new toothbrush, toothpaste, 2 bars of soap, and some white underwear. There was also an envelope with money in it. Sophia looked inside and immediately got very angry. What the hell? The amount of money given by her generous father would be enough for 2 or 3 meals at her favorite restaurant. But how could she survive for 3 months with that money? She angrily threw the envelope to the floor. How could he do this to me? The girl continued to curse as she dressed in a t-shirt and jeans, brushed her teeth, and looked around the house. The house was surprisingly not too bad, though it was much smaller than her father's mansion and more like her room in size. There was a TV in the living room, a good boiler in the bathroom, a large refrigerator in the kitchen, a stove, and a microwave. The only thing that wasn't there was food. Sophia was about to leave the room when she heard the same rustle from behind that had terrified her the night before. The girl flinched and slowly turned around. There was a fat rat staring at her from across the room. A loud cry pierced through the house. She ran outside in horror, as far away from the inhospitable house as possible. On the threshold, Sophia ran into the stranger. "Well," he said with a laugh, "I don't even know your name yet, but you've already almost knocked me over." The girl frowned and tried to step around the guy. He silently stepped back, letting her go outside. But Sophia realized that she shouldn't leave the house open and quickly turned around. The guy continued to stand on the threshold and smiled, looking at the girl's reaction. He was handsome and athletic, had a trendy haircut, and was wearing nice clothes. "So, let me introduce myself." He smiled again. "My name is Mike. And who are you? And what are you doing in this house?" "I'm Sophia." The girl raised her head arrogantly. "And it's none of your business who I am or what I am doing here." "Okay. I live here." "Really?" Mike raised an eyebrow. "Why haven't I seen you here before?" "Because I just got here yesterday." "Okay." Sophia hated it when people asked her questions she didn't want to answer. "Okay." The guy squinted his eyes. "But why were you screaming like crazy?" At this point, the girl lost control of her emotions and replied, "There's a rat in the house." She replied barely audibly, "A huge angry rat." "A rat?" Mike asked loudly and pretended to be frightened. And the girl realized that he was making fun of her. "Do you think it's funny?" She stomped her foot angrily. "Of course, it's so easy to mock people and make fun of their problems, isn't it?" "I didn't say that." The guy immediately turned serious. "It's just that you're acting funny. Besides the rodent problem, I suppose you're also hungry." The girl wanted to arrogantly turn away and say that she didn't have any other problems, but her stomach reacted with a jingling sound. Sophia blushed. "I see," the guy said. "So, come with me, I'll feed you." The girl was embarrassed, but didn't argue, and followed the stranger. It was better than staying alone in an empty house. It turned out that he lived not too far away. Mike approached the neighboring house. In the house, an elderly woman met them. The guy introduced her as his mom. "My name is Lauren," she said with a kind smile, wiping her hands with a kitchen towel. "Please come to the table. Breakfast is ready." Sophia wanted to proudly refuse, but her stomach demanded food loudly again, and she realized it was better to agree now. Together with Mike, who led her into the spacious dining room, she sat down at the table. There were pastries, cottage cheese puffs, and tea on the table. At home, the cook would make an omelette with bacon or a casserole for breakfast. But Sophia didn't see any of that on the table and was disappointed. But she had no choice. In her mind, she was already thinking about how many hours at the gym those pastries would cost her. But she was surprisingly satisfied with the tea. The fragrant herbal drink pleasantly warmed her body from the inside. "I saw a car in your yard," Sophia asked cautiously. "It's a nice car. Do you go to the city often?" For some reason, Lauren only shook her head, smiling sadly. "No one will take you to the city, Sophia. We've been friends with your father for a long time. My son and I are the ones who have looked after your house for the last 20 years. Jack called me this morning and warned me about you. I don't know what you did to upset him so much, but he told me not to take you to the city and not to give you a telephone. He's done a lot for us, so we'll do everything possible to fulfill his request." Tears came to Sophia's eyes again, and she turned away to the window. "So what am I supposed to do? To die in this damn village?" she said angrily, without turning her head. "It's a nice village. You will not die here for sure," Mike said soothingly. "You have a house, a pretty good one actually. We didn't have time to clean it this month. Sorry. And yes, there are mice. We've tried to get rid of them, but sooner or later, they come back. But I'm going to try to solve the problem again. I'll get you some mousetraps. Just don't get caught in them yourself. And you know, there's always enough work in the village. You can work in the vegetable garden or in the cattle barn." "Why would I work in your vegetable garden?" Sophia asked gloomily. "What do you mean? Why?" Lauren splashed her hands. "I suppose you don't know how to cook." The girl frowned even more. "We won't let you starve. You can come here for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But nothing comes for free. You'll have to work. Do you want to hire me as a slave? To work for food?" Sophia squinted her eyes. "No. You will only help me take care of the livestock and work in the kitchen. My son is helping me a lot, but he has to go to the city often for work. I'm not young anymore, and it's hard for me to cope with everything on my own. So you help me and I'll help you. That way, you'll be well fed and I'll have a helper. It's called mutual support. Dear, that's not what it's called in the civilized world," the girl said and got up from her chair. "Thank you for breakfast. It was delicious. But now, I have to go." The girl raised her head proudly, walked outside, and headed for her house. If her father had decided that she should stay in the village, then Sophia shouldn't even try to get out of this place. So she has to try to make this house comfortable, because she has to live in this horror until the end of the summer. Probably first of all she should unpack her suitcase, and then clean the house, or maybe clean the house first, and then go and find some food. Is there any cafe in this godforsaken place? After thinking for a while, the girl decided to start by cleaning the house. She found a couple of rags in the utility room and started to wipe dust off all the surfaces. It wasn't difficult, but Sophia was not used to cleaning, so she only managed to clean 2 rooms, the bedroom and the kitchen. Soon, she realized that a lot of time had passed after breakfast, and her body demanded lunch. And to get lunch, she needed to get out of the house. She spent more than an hour getting ready, trying to figure out how to go outside in cheap shorts and without any makeup. The village wasn't that big. There were only 3 streets. In 40 minutes, she reached the forest belt and turned back. She was luckier. In the opposite direction there was a grocery store, but some drunken men were standing near it, and she was afraid to go inside. And then, one of them noticed her. "Well, I've never seen such a beauty in our village. Where are you from, sweetheart?" He laughed nastily, patting himself on his plump thighs. "Do you want to join us, honey? We'll treat you to whatever you want." His friends looked at her with laughter too, and Sophia stepped back in horror, but crashed into someone's firm chest and froze. "Jeremy, does your wife know you flirt with the young girls?" A familiar, chuckling voice sounded from behind. Right now, Sophia was so grateful to Mike for protecting her that she almost hugged him. "Come on, Mike. It's just an innocent joke." The man immediately lost his interest. His drunk friends also turned around indifferently. "Thank you," the girl whispered, stepping away from the guy. "You're welcome." He smiled. "I knew you'd be looking for adventure, so I kept an eye on you. Do you need to the store? Let me work you." Sophia wanted to say proudly that she didn't need any help, but she looked at the alcoholics and obediently followed Mike again, especially since she finally realized that she wouldn't find any cafe here. The store consisted of 3 counters, one of which was completely dedicated to beer and snacks. Sophia was confused, not knowing what she should get first. "I guess you need a survival kit." Mike raised an eyebrow questioningly and, receiving an affirmative nod, turned to the saleswoman. "Hello, Mrs. Harris. Please give the girl a kilogram of pasta, buckwheat, rice, and potatoes, a dozen eggs, a couple of onions, bread, butter, and a bottle of milk." Mrs. Harris, a skinny middle-aged woman in an untidy apron, nodded indifferently and packed up the items. The price voice surprised Sophia very much. Such a small sum for all that. She pointed questioningly at the bag full of food. "But it's 3 times cheaper than ordering a cake at a cafe." "I don't know what cafes you're used to," the guy shrugged, taking the heavy bag from the counter. "But local prices are almost the same as in the city." Sophia paid thoughtfully and left the store after the guy. She was glad that he would bring the heavy bag to her house. Besides, she had no idea how to get home from here. Mike not only showed her the way, but he also brought all the groceries right into the kitchen and even helped her put everything on the shelves. "Do you have any idea how to cook it?" the girl asked, putting the big pot on the stove. Mike looked at her as if she were mentally ill, but answered, "There are cooking instructions on the boxes. Also, your grandmother had a good cookbook. Try to find it." "Are you sure you don't want to join us for dinner?" "No thanks," Sophia replied. "Your conditions are strange." "Okay. No problem," Mike shrugged and walked out, leaving the girl alone. "Okay. Go away. I'd prefer to be alone here anyway," the girl said when the guy left. But actually she was afraid to admit to herself that she was uncomfortable and even a little scared to be alone. "Hey, I wish I could call my friends," but she couldn't call anyone, and she was already very hungry. So she had to examine the boxes of food. Sophia carefully read everything that was written on the box of buckwheat. Maybe it's not as difficult as it seems. But an hour later, it turned out that it was even more difficult than she expected. The amount of water specified in the recipe was not enough, and the buckwheat remained a little raw on the top, but it was burnt on the bottom, and now a disgusting smell was spreading throughout the house. Moreover, it turned out that she needed to add salt, but she didn't buy the salt. Out of anger, the girl threw the buckwheat out the window together with the pot. How was she supposed to survive on her own if no one had taught her that? She poured the whole box of buckwheat into the pot, even though she only needed 1 glass. These groceries were not expensive, but if everything died in her hands before reaching her stomach, she would run out of money in just a couple of days. She wanted to sit on the floor and sob loudly, feeling sorry for herself, but that wouldn't help. Besides, her stomach kept telling her it wasn't used to starving until the evening. So, she had to forget about her pride and arrogance and go to the neighbor's house. Mike opened the door. The girl's eyes were wet, so the guy immediately understood the situation and let her into the house. Lauren, seeing the girl, nodded understandingly and invited her to the table with a gesture. "Could you please borrow me some salt?" Sophia asked, ignoring the invitation to the table. What a stubborn girl. Just like her mother. The woman smiled. "Of course I'll borrow your salt. So, is everything going well?" Apparently, the girl's eye twitched nervously, and Lauren understood everything. "Well, if you want, go and try again." She shrugged indifferently, handing the girl a small jar of salt. Sophia really struggled with herself. but instinct told her that it wasn't the right time to be arrogant. "Could you please explain what the problem was?" she asked reluctantly, clenching her hands into fists to keep from crying. "I'll explain everything you need, but you have to tell me what happened. But I'm hungry, and I'd like to have dinner. So join us, you can tell me everything over dinner." Sophia obediently sat down at the table full of food, and the girl realized that she wouldn't be able to resist. Besides, they invited her to dinner without asking for anything in return. Why not? Over dinner, she described her problems. Lauren laughed in a kind way but consoled the girl by saying that almost no one can make something edible on the first attempt, especially when trying to cook without someone's help. "Come tomorrow, in the morning, or before lunch you can watch me cook. Maybe you'll learn something, or even try to cook something yourself." "Okay," Sophia agreed. This option was much more attractive than the one that had been voiced before. Since the next day, life has become easier. The girl started each day by going to her neighbor's house and helping Lauren cook breakfast. Then she had an hour of free time, and after that, it was time to cook lunch and dinner. In the evening, she was completely free. A couple of times, Sophia helped her neighbor in the garden, but Lauren only asked her to pick berries, strawberries, and cherries, and there was nothing difficult about it. Moreover, she could eat fresh berries in the process. Gradually, Sophia learned how to handle a knife, although at first she was afraid of it and said that she had a nice manicure, and she was afraid to damage it. Gradually, Lauren started to give her more and more complicated tasks. From making dough and peeling potatoes, the girl switched to cutting vegetables and cooking grains. Sometimes, Lauren would suddenly go somewhere in the middle of the day, and Sophia would have to cook on her own. Realizing that it was some kind of exam, the girl tried very hard. Surprisingly, everything she cooked was edible, not a restaurant level, but certainly not as bad as the first cooked buckwheat. Sophia especially loved the pancake recipe. Previously, she thought that making pancakes was an innate skill that was impossible to learn. But to her surprise, it turned out to be quite easy. The first few attempts were a failure, but gradually, she learned to make soft, delicious pancakes. Besides, Lauren turned out to be a very cheerful woman, and Sophia was never bored in her company. She didn't even want to leave this house and go home. Mike also became a permanent part of her life. The guy was completely different from the image of a villager that the girl had in her head. He was cheerful, intelligent, well-read, and looked great with a bare torso while working in the vegetable garden. Sometimes Mike invited her for a walk, and despite the fact that the girl was very skeptical, every time he showed her something new. They went to the local river, which turned out to be surprisingly clean and warm, to several forest edges, and to some hill with a magnificent view of the city. Sometimes he brought her small gifts from the city, something tasty, or some face creams and serums. Sophia couldn't imagine her life without them. Such simple gifts made her happier than ever before. It seemed that even that sports car didn't make her as happy as the inexpensive hair conditioner and hairpins Mike had given her yesterday. He also told Sophia that in the living room of her house, there was a good library. At first, the girl didn't even notice it, but now, reading detective stories, fiction, or children's encyclopedias every night, she was more and more amazed at the world that surrounded her. After about a month of living in this village, Sophia noticed that Mike never let her into one of the rooms of his house, and of course, she was very curious. The guy kept silent for 3 days, but then he finally decided to tell her the truth. She opened the room, and as soon as the girl entered it, she froze in amazement. The whole room, from floor to ceiling, was filled with paintings. There were both finished works and paintings he had just begun to paint. "This is amazing," she said in admiration. "I prefer to hide it," Mike said embarrassedly. "When people find out I'm a painter, they start to treat me differently. I want to get settled in the city first and then tell everyone about it. Would you like me to paint your portrait?" "Of course." The girl's eyes sparkled. They spent almost a week on it. The girl realized that she had never felt such emotional intimacy with anyone before. They didn't even talk during the process, but still, the whole room was filled with warmth and coziness. He didn't show her the portrait, saying that he didn't want to show her the unfinished work, and the girl decided to wait obediently. Sophia felt so comfortable in this village that she even stopped locking the front door. And that was the biggest mistake of her life. One day, she came home after a work with Mike, but instead of a cozy silence, a blow to the head welcomed her. When she came to her senses, her head hurt as if it had split in two, but the girl felt no blood. Her eyes were covered with some cloth, her mouth was taped shut with duct tape, and her hands and feet were tied behind her back. Sophia realized she was tied to a chair, and then realized that there were some people in the room. It seems she's awake. Some nasty male voice laughed viciously. That's good. Don't worry, honey. Soon your daddy will send us some money, and we'll let you go. Maybe we won't even hurt you. The girl was getting more and more scared. She didn't know where she was, how much time had passed since the blow, or if anyone had noticed her missing. All she could do now was just sit there and listen to all the sounds around her. For some reason, she felt sorry for her father right now. He had thrown her into an independent life the way birds throw their chicks out of the nest. But after all, she wasn't left all alone, and he definitely didn't deserve everything that awaited him. The waiting is so boring. The same nasty voice said, "Stop it." Another male voice answered him, "We really can't touch her. Her father has connections. If you touch her, we won't survive. Are you sure you want that?" The voice fell silent resentfully, but not for long, and soon he began humming some cheerful melody. "How long do we have to wait?" a third person asked unhappily. "Idiots. Shut up. She'll be able to recognize you by your voice later." The man who was apparently the boss muttered, "We're lucky his daughter lives without guards, and we were able to kidnap her so easily. Try not to mess this up. The money should be delivered soon, and then we'll leave." Apparently, the other criminals respected and feared him, so they really shut up. Sophia began to think about what she could do to save herself. Sitting and just waiting for help was stupid. After all, she had no idea if any help would even come. Trying to negotiate with the bastards was even more stupid because they were already on the edge of patience. And trying to get out on your own was out of the question. So what should she do? Suddenly they heard some rumble outside. She could hear the criminals stand up abruptly. "Oh shit." Their boss muttered angrily, "Someone found us. Kill her and let's get out of here." Sophia shouted indignantly. This was the scenario she didn't like at all. By the sound of footsteps, she determined when someone got close enough to her, so she swung her feet as hard as she could, falling over backward. The plan was incredibly insane and pointless. She realized that even with the best of luck, all she would achieve was a bruised back. Perhaps she would win a few seconds, but would it help her? Apparently, luck was on her side today, because the moment she fell coincided with the moment she heard the sound of glass breaking. She could hear the sounds of dozens of heavy boots and the cursing of her kidnappers across the room. "Sophia, my girl." Someone approached her and began to untie her. After a few seconds, the girl was finally able to remove that damn blindfold from her eyes. The first thing she saw was her father's dumbfounded face. "Dad." Sophia stretched her arms forward but felt a sharp pain in her back. But her father hugged her tightly before she could get up. "It's okay. It's over," he repeated soothingly. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Forgive me." Sophia couldn't answer anything as she sobbed in her father's arms. After that, everything was happening like a fog. She and her dad were taken into an armored car where some man was praising the girl for her courage and creativity. Her eyes were blindfolded, so she didn't really know what she was doing. But it turned out that when she swung her feet, she knocked the gun from the criminal without realizing it, and it saved her life. She was taken to one of the best hospitals in the region. The doctors there examined her, prescribed ointment for her bruised back, and were happy that there were no other injuries. Then her father took her home and didn't leave her alone until the morning. He kept saying that it was stupid to leave her alone there, that he was sorry, and that tomorrow he would put everything back to the way it was. Her car was already fixed, and her bank account would be unblocked. It didn't matter to him whether she had changed after his harsh methods or not, because the main thing was that his girl was alive. Sophia cried almost until morning, not understanding where she was getting so many tears from. A little later, her father told her that the night she was kidnapped, Mike was on his way to her house and he witnessed the kidnapping. He immediately called Jack, and Jack began the rescue operation much earlier than the criminals called him to demand a ransom. During the call, police identified the location of the criminals and immediately went there. Jack also mentioned that he was very grateful to Mike. In the morning, the man woke up in his daughter's room but didn't see her around and panicked. He immediately started looking for her all over the house, imagining the scariest scenarios in his head. But suddenly, he found her in the most unexpected place in the kitchen. When he saw Sophia, he sat down at the table, out of relief and surprise because his lovely daughter was standing at the stove making pancakes. He was even a little shocked. "Good morning, Dad." She smiled radiantly, turning to him. "Breakfast will be ready soon." Jack promised himself to go to the village and thanked Lauren. He didn't know how she had managed to change his daughter so much in just a couple of months, but he was ready to make a monument to this woman. A little later, Sophia surprised him by saying that she was going to go to university to become a lawyer and would stop leading an idle lifestyle. But Jack didn't believe his daughter would be able to live without parties. But he was surprised when Sophia started studying diligently and forgot about clubs and bars. In just 4 years, she graduated and got a job in his company. Gradually, all colleagues stopped joking, saying that the girl got her diploma for bribes, and really began to respect her. Now Sophia had only 2 friends left, but they were true friends ready to support her in every possible way. Life became nice and peaceful. One day, when her father decided to take Sophia out for a walk, he insisted on going to an art gallery. The girl tried to refuse because she wanted to go to the planetarium, but Dad insisted because today there was an exhibition of a popular artist in the gallery. Eventually, the girl agreed. When Sophia entered the gallery, she felt that something was wrong. It was as if she had already seen each of these artworks. There was something very warm and familiar in every picture. But she was really shocked when they reached the main picture. It was her own portrait. Here is the centerpiece of today's collection. A portrait of a nymph in sunset rays. The guide said cheerfully. A young artist who has recently graduated from one of the best art schools in the country is showing stunning results. In his article, you and I may have witnessed the birth of a legend whose name will take its place alongside such big names as Leonardo da Vinci, Rembrandt, and Vincent van Gogh. Sophia was standing in front of the portrait and didn't follow the group any further, remaining alone. "Do you like it?" A familiar chuckling voice came from behind her. "This painting is the only one that isn't for sale. You know, in this painting, I've depicted a beautiful girl, and I've never met anyone like her in my entire life." "Oh, really?" Sophia turned politely, trying her best to hold back a smile. "So, was this girl special to you? So special that you decided to make a portrait of her?" "Yeah, that's the right word to use." Mike nodded, taking a step in her direction. "She was special. There was nothing between us. But this girl won my heart with her amazing sincerity, you know. I couldn't even breathe normally when she was around, especially when I was painting this portrait. And I hope that someday I will get a chance to talk to this goddess and invite her into my life as my wife." "Oh, really?" The girl took a step forward, unable to hide her smile. "Do you think this girl will agree? She seems quite arrogant. Whatever she is, she's wonderful, and I don't think I could live without her." Mike had crossed the distance between them in a second, and now he was standing right in front of her. He pulled a velvet box from his pocket. "Sophia, Would you be willing to spoil me with your delicious pancakes for the rest of our lives? He asked with a very serious expression on his face, and the girl laughed loudly and cheerfully, but on one condition. At least once a week you have to chop wood without a shirt on. Sophia didn't have time to say anything more. The guy hugged her tightly and kissed her.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.